Well, if you own a home, you already know there's always something that needs fixing or tending to. So my latest adventure here at the homestead is a couple of valves associated with the suction lines on my pool need to be replaced. They're the original valves that have been there since 1979 when the house was built. And of course the pool was built at the same time. So they are on their last legs, and we're going to be replacing them and a little bit of the plumbing that's associated with them as well. So let me show you what we're dealing with. All right, this is what we're dealing with. So we have these two valves, and this is an old pool put in 1979. I'm assuming these are the original valves. One runs to the skimmer, and then the other one runs to the drain in the bottom of the pool. And I'm pretty sure both of these are that the innards are starting to give out, which maybe could be fixed, but I just want to get rid of these old style valves and I want to put in a new style, which I'll show you here in just a moment. But what we're going to be doing is cutting these two suction lines right below that fitting that you see there. And then we're going to basically replicate this gnarly thing here, which has got 6 elbows before it goes into the actual pool pump. And then of course our valves will actually go in the same place. So let's gather up our supplies that we're going to need and what we'll end up needing for facilitating the cut on these two suction lines, so that we can, once we get the two cuts down here, by the way, we can actually just unscrew this piece and this whole assembly will just lift off, and then I'll be able to sort of rebuild this, go off somewhere in the shade and rebuild this assembly in a careful way so that it'll just basically drop back in. All right. Okay. So I am going to be using a reciprocating saw with a fine tooth blade in it. You don't have to use one of these to cut this kind of pipe. You could use a jigsaw, you could use a hacksaw if you can get it in there. I've had to dig down a little bit, so this is going to help me with reaching where I need to reach to. They even make a little gizmo that is just a wire with 2 loops on each end that you can wrap around and then just run it back and forth, and that will even take care of it. We're just going to use this though, is what I had readily accessible. So let's go ahead and see what we can do here. I'm going to have to kind of dig out a little bit so I can get my saw as level as possible. All right, should suffice. All right. See if we can get our other one. we've got those two cut. Now we just got to loosen that up and we can pull that whole assembly off. All right, so there we go. That's what I mean about just being able to pull that whole assembly off and then we could replicate it. I don't have enough fittings and so forth. So I've got to make a list of things that I need, and then we'll go get those and bring them back, and we'll start assembling this new mechanism here, and then we'll get to a point here where we can just drop it back in place. All right, we have made a hardware store run, and we have all of our parts laid out here on the table. And of course, as you remember, this is the contraption that we are going to replicate right there. One of the things that we'll have to do, this is where I cut it off from the suction lines coming up out of the ground. When we pull it, when we get it all back together, the bottom of this will need to go at about an inch, a good inch past this right here. So I have to keep that in mind. That's to give us enough room for our fittings to slip down over those suction lines coming up out of the ground. But what we have are, there's our two valves, just standard pool valves like you would see on modern pools. We have 6 90-degree elbows. We have 1 T. We have 4 threaded adapters. Each of these adapters will be an adapter that screws into each end of this. We have our union fitting, I think you call this. That's where it will screw up onto the pool pump. We have a section of 1.5 PVC pipe, Teflon tape, and of course we have our little handy pack of PVC primer and glue. So that's everything that we need. And again, we're just going to, by looking at this, we're just going to replicate what we've got here, and we should be able to just go, we'll test fit everything first, but we should be able to just slide it onto those 2 lines that are coming out of the ground, and then the end with the union on it should just mesh up perfectly with the pool pump. So that's the idea. So let's get started. All right, I think I'm gonna get started by taking this union and an elbow, and we're gonna get those attached together. So I'm gonna just cut off a piece just big enough that will allow me to mate these 2 pieces here to the point to where they're actually touching, and that should get us started. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to be using a hacksaw, and I'm just going to eyeball this piece here in terms of what I need. Now we'll cut a piece about 1.5 inches long. Okay, so we'll have one end like so, the other end just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this up. Okay, so one of the things we have to do here is we need to prime the inside of this. In fact, all surfaces that come in contact with one another, we're going to need to prime. So let's see if I can show you this. Just going to put this fancy little purple primer on all the surfaces that we're going to be gluing up. Like so. Okay. Now I don't need to necessarily worry about the orientation on this union fitting relative to the elbow. Just gonna put a little bit right there and let that ooze down in there. Okay, just gonna let that sit for a second. I don't know if you can see this, but this next elbow that I put on, which is that one right there, you can see it's not going to be quite at a 90 relative to this, so I need to replicate that. That's going to be a little tricky. We're just going to have to eyeball it, but I think we can do that. we're going to be, when we're installing these, we're going to be turning them clockwise. So we want the tail, looking at it in this direction, we want the tail of this as we wrap it to go counterclockwise, or just counter to the direction that we're rotating. So we'll start putting that on there. Oops. Okay, there's one wrap, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm being pretty generous. And then we're going to go ahead and let's get a valve here. Really tighten that up there. There we go. All right, let's get another one. Okay, one on the left is the new one, one on the right is the old one. I position my valve handles slightly at a different angle just to make them a little bit easier to access. So yeah, we'll let that set up here for about 15 or 20 minutes and we'll go dry fit it and see how it does. Okay, so I have just set it on here just to dry fit it, so everything's going to line up, and everything looks great. So all I got to do is just clean off these 2 suction lines coming up out of the ground, clean those up a little bit, prime them, and then we'll be able to put some glue around that and slide that on there, and then of course tighten up our union connection to the pool pump, and we'll be good to go. So let me clean off our pipes coming out of the ground here. right, so we've got it in. Everything's glued up. I did knock out, I had these kind of thicker concrete blocks underneath my pump there. And I knocked those out and have some other stuff there just kind of temporarily in place. I'll need to do something a little bit more permanent, but it's good for now. Everything's hooked up. Got that nice and tight there where the union is at. And we just need to turn it on and see if we are leak free. Okay, so we have let this sit for about almost 3 hours. So I would say our PVC glue, our connections are all set up quite well. So we're going to go ahead and flip the power on. And I probably am going to have to prime the pump. Okay, so we are definitely leak free. And still got a little air in the system. I'm just waiting for that to get purged. Well, so we finished that job. Altogether, I guess it took me about an hour and a half to complete everything. So not a big job. A little bit complicated in terms of rebuilding that whole kind of twisted mess of plumbing, but it worked out. I was able to replicate the big piece that came out and got everything back in. The nice thing about these new valves is they are quarter turn valves. So to turn them completely off, they just have to turn a quarter of one turn versus those old valves. Honestly, if I'm kind of guessing here, but those things had to probably be turned 360 degrees 7 or 8 times to fully open them or fully close them. So these new valves are great. And I use those valves, I kind of adjust them because I have a pool vacuum that I have to make sure is running the right speed. So those new valves make setting the suction on the 2 different lines just so much easier so that I can balance things out and my pool vacuum works correctly. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed the video or learned something from it or were inspired by it. With that, I hope everybody has a great day, a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again on the next video. Bye now.